The sun was setting behind the distant mountains, painting the rocky planet in shades of gold and red. A lone human soldier walked across the rough ground, his boots crunching against the dust that shimmered under the fading light. The place was silent except for the faint hum of his tracker, a small handheld device flashing faint green lights. He was part of a peacekeeping mission far away from Earth, patrolling an unfamiliar world that had once been hostile but now stood strangely quiet. He had grown used to silence, to the cold winds that whispered through the canyons, to the feeling that he was always being watched. Yet that evening something felt different. The air was heavier. The sky carried a faint vibration that made his heart beat faster. He stopped, adjusted the radar strap to his wrist, and noticed an unusual signal blinking rapidly on the screen. It wasn't a rock movement nor a mechanical error. It was something alive, something foreign. Before he could report it, a sharp streak of light cut across the horizon. It moved fast, faster than any aircraft he knew, and then, in the distance, it crashed. A glowing trail of smoke spiraled into the air, and the ground trembled slightly beneath his feet. His first thought was of danger, maybe a weapon, maybe an enemy scout ship, but something inside him urged him forward. Against his usual cautious instincts, he began running toward the crash site. The path was rough, scattered with stones that glowed faintly from the heat of the impact. As he climbed over a ridge, he saw it, a silver craft half buried in the sand. Its smooth body was cracked open, one wing broken off completely. Sparks still flickered around its edges. He could hear a faint hissing sound like air leaking through metal. The craft was small, nothing like the bulky transport ships humans used. This one looked delicate, almost elegant, built with care rather than force. He moved closer, his pulse racing. His training told him to wait, to call for backup, to stay hidden until he understood what he was facing. But his curiosity was stronger. He climbed over the twisted metal and peered inside. The air inside the ship was thick with smoke and an odd sweet smell like burnt flowers. And then he saw her. A figure sat slumped near the control seat, a woman, though not quite human. Her skin had a faint shimmer reflecting the dim light. Her hair, long and pale like moonlight, clung to her face. There was a deep cut on her arm, and her breathing was uneven. Yet even in that moment of weakness, she held herself upright, trying to appear calm, her eyes half open but steady, as if refusing to show pain. The soldier hesitated. He had seen many beings in his missions, but none like her. There was a strange mix of strength and fragility about her, something that told him she wasn't a warrior, yet she had the heart of one. Carefully, he stepped forward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Can you hear me?" he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. She turned her head slightly, her eyes locking onto his. They were bright and deep, almost glowing, not the eyes of a frightened creature, but of someone trying to understand what stood before her. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but her voice came out weak, more like a whisper than words. He could only catch fragments of sound, unfamiliar syllables from a language he didn't know. He realized she needed help. He quickly checked her pulse. It was faint but steady. When he tried to lift her, she resisted at first, her hand tightening around a strange metallic object that looked like a small crystal. Her pride was visible even in pain. She didn't want to appear helpless before a stranger. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're safe. I won't hurt you." His calm tone seemed to reach her. She released her grip slightly, allowing him to help her stand. Her body trembled, not from fear but exhaustion. Together they made it out of the wreckage. The cold evening wind brushed against her face, and she looked up at the twin moons rising above the cliffs. For a moment he thought he saw sadness in her eyes, not just fear of death but sorrow for something lost. He guided her toward his transport rover parked nearby. She stumbled once but quickly straightened, as if forcing herself to walk with dignity. It was clear she wasn't used to weakness. The soldier felt a strange respect for her. Whoever she was, she carried herself like someone important, someone trained to hide emotion. Inside the rover, he wrapped a thermal blanket around her. She didn't say a word, just sat silently studying him. He could feel her gaze, calm yet searching, as if she was trying to read his intentions. The translator on his wrist tried to pick up her language, but all it translated were fragments. Mission. Danger. Trust. He wished he could tell her not to worry, that she was safe, but words failed between their worlds. As the rover sped back toward his outpost, the atmosphere grew heavy. She kept her eyes on the stars through the small window, her face expressionless. He wondered who she was, why she had been alone, and what kind of ship she was flying. Her suit was unlike any he'd seen, thin but strong, covered in small, glowing lines that pulsed softly, almost like veins. He noticed a small emblem near her shoulder, shaped like a crescent within a circle. Halfway to the base, she stirred and spoke a few words again, this time clearer. The translator caught one. "Don't tell." He looked at her, surprised. She met his eyes firmly, a silent plea in her expression. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he nodded anyway. Somehow he knew that whatever she was hiding, it was something she couldn't let others find out. When they reached the outpost, night had fallen. The wind outside howled softly across the sand. The soldier brought her inside, away from the cold. The base was small, just a few metal rooms and flickering lights. He laid her on a cot and treated the wound on her arm with a med gel pack. She winced slightly but didn't make a sound. He admired her composure. Most people would cry out or pull away, but she only closed her eyes and breathed steadily, controlling the pain as if she'd trained for it. When he finished, she whispered something that sounded like thanks. He couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the gratitude in her tone. He gave her some water, which she accepted cautiously, studying the bottle before drinking. Her movements were graceful, almost ceremonial. Hours passed. She rested while he sat nearby, recording a report but keeping it vague. He didn't mention the crash or the alien. He told himself he was following her wish. Don't tell. Something about her made him believe she wasn't a threat. Maybe it was the calm in her eyes or the quiet strength in her voice. As the night deepened, the soldier checked her again. She was awake now, sitting up, looking around the room. When he approached, she didn't flinch. Instead, she pointed at the communicator on his desk, then shook her head. A clear sign she didn't want him to use it. He smiled faintly, realizing again how composed she was, even in danger. He decided to ask something, even if she might not understand. "Who are you?" For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then, with careful movement, she pointed at the small emblem on her suit and then at the stars beyond the window. Her eyes softened slightly, as if she were remembering something far away. The translator hummed for a second before giving a single word. "Royal." The soldier froze. Royal, could it mean what he thought it did? Was she from some noble family, maybe even the ruler's kin? It seemed impossible, yet her poise, her calmness, her refusal to panic, it all made sense. He didn't press further. She was clearly not ready to reveal more, and he didn't want to break the fragile trust forming between them. That night, sleep came slowly to both of them. The soldier kept watch while she rested lightly, her breathing even but her fingers still clutching that glowing crystal. Sometimes she murmured in her sleep, quiet words from a language filled with emotion he couldn't understand. When morning came, the light poured softly into the room. She was already awake, sitting near the small window watching the sunrise. The soldier noticed something different in her expression, a mix of calmness and quiet worry. She looked peaceful, yet her eyes carried the weight of something larger, as if she was calculating what to do next. He brought her a small meal from the ration kit. She took it politely, studying the food before tasting it. For the first time, he saw the corner of her lips curve into the faintest smile. It wasn't a full one, but it was enough to show that behind her collected mask, there was a spark of warmth, of humanity, or something very close to it. They didn't speak much. Yet in those silent moments, something changed between them. He began to feel protective of her, not because she was weak, but because he sensed that beneath her strength she was alone. And she, though distant and composed, seemed to trust him more than she wanted to admit. Neither of them knew what the next day would bring, whether her people would come searching for her, or if his own command would discover what he had hidden. But for now, in that small outpost on a quiet alien planet, two beings from different worlds sat together, both trying to stay strong, both pretending not to feel the strange connection growing quietly between them. And though she didn't show it, the alien princess felt something she had never known before, a sense of safety, not from guards or walls, but from the presence of a human soldier who looked at her not as a creature or a mystery, but as someone who simply needed help. She struggled to stay composed, to keep her emotions locked away as she had been taught all her life. But deep inside, she knew this meeting had all her. The quiet of the early morning wrapped around the small outpost like a blanket. The wind outside had slowed and faint sunlight slipped through the cracks in the walls. Inside, the human soldier sat at his desk, his fingers tapping softly against a metal cup as he thought about the woman resting in the next room. Every few minutes he found himself glancing toward her, still unsure of what to make of her presence. She looked peaceful, but something about her silence carried weight, as if she was carrying 1,000 thoughts she couldn't share. When she finally opened her eyes, he saw that same calm look he had noticed the night before. She sat upright, her back straight, every movement graceful and measured. Even though she was still weak, she tried to appear strong. It was clear to him that she was not used to being cared for, or being seen in a vulnerable state. She carried herself like someone who had been taught to hide every emotion, to never show fear no matter the situation. He walked over with a small bowl of food. "You should eat," he said softly. She looked at the bowl for a long time before taking it. Her hands moved with precision, like every motion had purpose. When she finally tasted the food, she nodded slowly, not saying a word, but he understood that it meant thank you. He tried to talk again, hoping she might tell him something about who she was. "You came from far away, didn't you?" he asked. She looked at him quietly, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up a small piece of metal from the table and began drawing lines on the surface with her finger. At first he thought she was just passing time, but when he leaned closer he realized she was sketching the stars. Not random ones, but a specific pattern, like a map. She pointed to one cluster of stars, then tapped her chest gently as if to say, "That's where I'm from." He stared at the markings, amazed. The stars didn't match any of the charts in their system. Her home was far, maybe even outside their known region. When he looked back at her, she had already wiped the drawing away with her hand, leaving only a smudge of dust behind. She didn't want him to know too much. Throughout the day she spoke very little. But she watched everything, his movements, his tools, even the way he handled simple objects. Sometimes her eyes followed his gestures with quiet curiosity, as if she was trying to understand human behavior. Other times, when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression softened into something that almost looked like sadness. The soldier noticed these small changes. He couldn't explain why he felt so drawn to them. Maybe it was because she reminded him of the people back home, strong on the outside but hiding something fragile inside. Or maybe it was because there was something deeply human about her despite being from another world. As the sun climbed higher, he decided to check her ship. She tried to stop him, shaking her head quickly, but he reassured her. "I won't take anything. I just need to make sure no one finds it." She hesitated, then gave a faint nod, trusting him once more. The crash site was about a mile away. When he reached it, most of the smoke had faded, but the ground still shimmered with heat. The wreckage looked worse than before, half buried in sand, wires hanging out like veins from a wounded creature. He could tell from one look that it wasn't an ordinary ship. It was crafted with precision and beauty, unlike the bulky designs of human engineering. Inside, he found strange symbols etched on the panels, flowing lines that glowed faintly when he touched them. There was no sign of weapons or military gear, which made him even more certain that she hadn't come for war. Near the control seat, he found a small silver band, probably something she had dropped. When he picked it up, it lit up with soft blue light and projected a tiny image into the air. It was a hologram, her standing with a group of others who looked like her kind. But in the center of the image, he saw something that made his breath catch. Everyone else bowed slightly toward her. He switched it off quickly, realizing what it meant. She wasn't just someone from another planet. She was someone important, maybe even royalty. That explained her posture, her silence, her control, and it also explained the fear in her eyes when she told him not to tell anyone. If others knew who she really was, both their worlds could be in danger. He carefully placed the band in his pocket and covered the wreckage with sand to hide it. As he returned to the outpost, the sun began to set again. He found her standing outside, her pale hair glowing faintly in the orange light. When she saw him, she gave him a questioning look, as if asking whether anyone had followed. He shook his head. For a while they stood there in silence, watching the distant horizon. The wind carried soft whispers that made the moment feel almost peaceful. Then she spoke, slowly, carefully, words that the translator struggled to catch. "You help me." "Why?" Her voice was soft but steady, and it surprised him. It was the first full sentence she had spoken in his language. He smiled a little. Because you needed help. Isn't that reason enough? She seemed to think about it, as if the idea itself was new to her. Then she nodded slightly, her eyes lowering for a moment. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried emotion. Over the next few days, a quiet rhythm developed between them. He repaired some of her damaged equipment while she spent hours studying human objects, books, tools, screens. Sometimes she asked small questions through the translator like, why humans fight, or why you live far from home. Her curiosity was endless, but it came from a place of innocence, not judgment. He told her stories about Earth, about oceans, forests, music, and rain. She listened with quiet wonder, her face softening whenever he spoke of beauty. When he mentioned laughter, she tilted her head slightly, trying to understand. Laughter means joy, she asked one evening, pointing at the smile on his face. Yes, he said, it means joy, happiness. Sometimes people laugh when they're nervous too. She seemed to think it over seriously, as if laughter was a strange kind of power. Then she tried it, a small, awkward sound that barely resembled laughter, but it was genuine. He couldn't help but laugh for real then, and she looked startled before joining him again, her laughter soft but beautiful. It was the first time he saw her lose control of her calmness, even for a second, and in that moment she seemed less like a princess from another world and more like someone human, someone real. But the peace didn't last. One night he woke up to a faint buzzing from the communicator. It was a message from command, reports of unidentified ships in nearby airspace. Search operations had begun. He knew instantly they were looking for her. His chest tightened with worry. If they found her, there would be no mercy, not from either side. He looked at her, sleeping quietly on the cot, the faint glow of the crystal in her hand lighting her face. She looked peaceful, unaware of the danger closing in. He hesitated, wondering if he should tell her. But before he could decide, her eyes opened as if she had already sensed it. She sat up and whispered, "They come." "How do you know?" he asked, startled. She pointed toward the sky. Outside, faint blue lights shimmered far above the clouds. Her senses were sharper than his instruments. She stood quickly, her composure returning, but there was something new in her eyes. Fear. Not for herself, but for something larger. He knew what he had to do. "We can hide you," he said. "There's a cave system near the ridge. They won't scan it." She hesitated, her gaze locked on his. "You risk your life." He shook his head. "Maybe, but you're not my enemy." For a moment she didn't move. Then she gave a slow, respectful nod, a silent promise that she understood the cost of his choice. Together they packed what little they had. As they stepped into the night, the air buzzed faintly with the sound of distant ships searching. She moved with surprising strength despite her wounds, her steps sure, her eyes focused. He followed beside her, knowing every second mattered. When they reached the ridge, she stopped and turned toward him. "You help again," she said softly. "Why?" He smiled faintly, breathing hard. "Because you'd do the same for me." She looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for truth in his words. Then very quietly she said, "I think, yes." They stood there under the twin moons, their faces lit by pale light. Two beings from different worlds bound by something neither of them could explain. The soldier felt a strange peace even with danger surrounding them. And though she tried to keep her expression calm, the princess's heart beat faster. She had spent her whole life hiding her emotions, keeping her mind collected, but now, with a human beside her, she felt something shifting, something she could no longer control. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if staying collected was really strength, or just fear of being seen for who she truly was. The night was quiet again, but it was not peaceful anymore. The human soldier and the alien princess had found shelter deep inside a rocky cave, hidden beneath the ridge where scanners couldn't easily reach. The walls were damp, the air was cool, and the only light came from the soft glow of the crystal she carried. It shimmered faintly in her hand, lighting both their faces with a pale blue hue. They had been walking for hours. The soldier could feel the exhaustion in his legs, but he didn't complain. The princess had said very little, only whispering short directions or gestures to stay silent when she sensed something above. Sometimes she would stop, tilt her head slightly, and listen. Her hearing was sharper than his instruments. It amazed him how calm she remained even though they were being hunted. When they finally settled in the cave, she sat down quietly on a flat rock, her back straight as always. Her eyes reflected the flickering light, distant and deep, like she was thinking about a world far away. The soldier sat across from her, watching her for a while before finally saying, "You don't have to act so strong all the time. It's okay to rest." She looked at him, confused for a moment, then said softly, "Strong is my duty." He smiled gently. "Maybe, but even strong people need a break sometimes." She didn't reply, but something in her expression softened. She set the crystal down beside her and finally exhaled, as if letting go of a burden she had carried too long. The silence between them was comfortable now. Not awkward, just quiet understanding. The soldier leaned against the wall and looked at her closely. In the faint light, he could see how tired she really was. There were faint lines under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the crystal. Yet even in weakness, she carried a kind of grace he couldn't describe. After a long pause, she spoke again. "On my world," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully through the translator, "we are taught control, no fear, no anger, no sadness, only duty." He listened quietly, trying to imagine what that kind of world would be like. A place where people hid every emotion, where even kindness was measured. She continued, "When we feel, we lose respect. They say feeling makes you weak." Her voice was calm, but there was something deep beneath it, a quiet pain. The soldier nodded. "I don't think that's true. Feeling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Or whatever word fits your world." That made her look up. "Human?" she repeated softly, tasting the word like it was new. "Your people show feeling all the time." He laughed a little. "Yes, sometimes too much." She tilted her head slightly, a small smile almost appearing on her face. "Maybe that is why you are free." The word stayed with him. He had never thought of emotions as freedom before, but maybe she was right. People on Earth cried, laughed, argued, but that was what made them real. He realized she had been living in a world where even smiling was seen as weakness. Hours passed. They shared small bits of food from his ration pack. She studied each piece carefully before eating, always polite, always precise. Her curiosity never faded. She asked about the small things. How water from a bottle could taste so different from the streams on her planet. How humans could live with such short lives yet still dream so much. When she spoke about her home, her voice changed. It became softer, almost distant. She told him about a sky filled with floating lights, cities that moved with the wind, and gardens that grew on silver cliffs. But then she fell quiet, her eyes lowering. "Now it is not the same," she whispered. "War changes even the stars." He wanted to ask more, but he could see she didn't want to talk about it. So instead, he told her a story about his first mission, how he had once gotten lost in a desert and been rescued by a stranger. She listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face, as if she was trying to understand not just his words but the emotions behind them. When he finished, she said softly, "Humans help even when they don't know why." He nodded. "Sometimes, yes. We just do it because it feels right." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer. Then she looked away, but not before he noticed something in her expression, a trace of warmth that hadn't been there before. As the night grew colder, he noticed her shivering slightly. Without thinking, he took off his jacket and offered it to her. She hesitated, unsure what to do. "It's okay," he said. "You'll freeze." Slowly, she took it, her fingers brushing against his for a brief moment. Her touch was cold but gentle. She wrapped the jacket around herself, the large sleeves hanging loosely. It looked strange on her. Too big, too human, but she didn't seem to mind. She gave him a quiet nod, her eyes soft, almost thankful. He leaned back against the wall again, trying to rest. The cave was quiet except for the faint hum of her crystal and the sound of the wind outside. Every so often he opened his eyes and found her still awake, staring at the crystal like it held a memory she couldn't forget. "Does it mean something?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "It is my bond." "Bond?" She held it up, the light shimmering on her face. "It connects to my world, to my people, to my family." There was a small pause before the last word, as if saying it was difficult. The soldier understood then that the crystal was more than just an object. It was her connection to everything she had left behind. He hesitated before asking, "Do you miss them?" Her eyes glistened faintly in the dim light. "Yes," she whispered, "but I cannot go back." "Not yet." He wanted to ask why, but he stopped himself. Maybe she wasn't ready to tell him. Maybe she couldn't. Instead, he just said, "You'll find a way." The next morning came quietly. The sun barely touched the entrance of the cave, but they both knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. They stepped out carefully, scanning the horizon. The search ships were gone, at least for now. They walked back toward the outpost, following the long trail of red dust. The air was cool, and the silence between them was different now. Softer, more trusting. She no longer walked a few steps ahead, but beside him. Along the way, she asked him about Earth again, about its colors, its people, its music. He described the sound of waves crashing, the smell of rain on the ground, and how people danced to celebrate even the smallest things. She listened like a child hearing a fairy tale. "Your world sounds alive," she said quietly. "Ours forgot how to live." "Maybe that's why you came," he said with a smile. She gave a faint smile too, though there was sadness in it. Maybe. When they reached the outpost again, she seemed different. The soldier could sense a change in her, something warmer, less distant. She moved with the same calm grace, but her eyes were no longer as cold. He showed her how some of the machines worked, and she watched closely, fascinated by even the smallest things. When he handed her a communicator, she studied it for a long time before saying, "Humans build simple things that do great work," he laughed lightly. "We try our best." She looked at him seriously. "That is what makes you strong. You try even when you do not know what will happen." Her words struck him deeply. She had a way of saying simple things that carried meaning far beyond what was spoken. That evening they shared a quiet meal. She sat near the window, watching the distant stars, her expression calm but thoughtful. The soldier noticed she wasn't clutching the crystal as tightly anymore. It lay gently beside her hand, as if she was learning to let go, even just a little. When he asked what she was thinking, she said softly, "You show me something I did not know before." "What's that?" he asked. She turned her gaze toward him. "Trust." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt heavy but peaceful, like they both understood something had changed between them. She had begun to see him not just as a stranger who saved her, but as someone she could rely on. Later, when the night fell again, she sat quietly near the crystal, her eyes half closed. He watched her from across the room, realizing how much she had changed in such a short time. She was still collected, still proud, but there was warmth now, a kind of gentle light that hadn't been there before. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether her people would find her, or if their fragile peace would be broken. But for now, in that small moment of quiet, he knew something was shifting between them. And deep down, though she tried to stay calm and composed, the alien princess knew it too. For the first time in her life, someone had looked past her title, her power, her duties, and had seen her as she really was. That simple truth frightened her more than any enemy ever could, but it also made her feel alive. The following days passed slowly, but with a strange peace neither of them expected. The soldier had stopped counting how long the alien princess had been with him. Time felt different now. The quiet desert outside, the hum of the machines, and the sound of her soft breathing at night had become part of his new routine. It was strange how someone so different had started to feel familiar. The princess, too, had changed in small but visible ways. She no longer stood apart from everything like an untouchable figure. She moved more freely around the outpost, observing things, asking quiet questions, sometimes even smiling when she saw something that fascinated her. Her eyes, which once held only caution, now carried warmth and curiosity. One morning, the soldier found her standing outside, her face turned toward the sunrise. The light touched her pale skin and her silver-like hair shimmered faintly. For a moment, she didn't look like someone from another world. She looked simply alive, lost in the beauty of the morning. He stepped beside her and said softly, "You like the sunrise?" She nodded. "It feels gentle," he smiled. "It's the start of a new day. For us, it means hope." She thought about that for a moment. "On my world," she said quietly, "we do not see the sun. We live under glowing clouds that never change. There is no morning, no night, only light and duty." He looked at her with quiet sympathy. "That sounds lonely." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him and asked, "Do you not get tired of feeling so much? Happiness, pain, anger, joy. It must be heavy." He chuckled softly. "Sometimes it is. But feeling reminds us we're alive." Even pain means we still care. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned her eyes back to the horizon. Maybe that is what I never learned, she said in a low voice. How to feel and not break. The words stayed with him for the rest of the day. He could sense how deeply she meant them. For someone raised to hide emotions, learning to feel again must have been like learning to breathe for the first time. Later that evening, he received a signal from the command center. The transmission was weak, but the message was clear. Alien activity detected in nearby sectors. Stay alert, his heart sank. He knew what it meant. Her people were searching for her, and the humans were searching too. If either side found out about their time together, it could mean disaster. He didn't tell her right away. She had just started smiling again, and he didn't want to take that peace away. But she noticed the worry on his face almost instantly. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she asked, "Something is wrong?" He tried to sound casual. Just a routine signal. Nothing serious. She didn't believe him. You hide things now, she said softly. He sighed. There was no use lying to someone who could read emotion like a pulse. Your people are close, he admitted. And my command knows something's here. We don't have much time before someone finds us. She stayed silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, if they find me, they will take me. You will be in danger. I know, he said simply. Her eyes softened. Then why not leave me? He looked at her seriously. Because you're not my enemy. You're my responsibility. Something changed in her gaze then, a mix of sadness and something deeper that she didn't want to show. She lowered her head slightly and said, You risk too much for one who does not belong here. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what makes it worth it. That night, neither of them slept. The soldier spent hours checking the perimeter scanners while she sat quietly near the crystal, lost in thought. Sometimes he caught her whispering softly to it, as if speaking to someone far away. He approached her gently. Are you trying to contact your people? She shook her head. No, I only listen. The crystal carries memory. It sings of home. He sat beside her, curious. The crystal glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat. For a moment he thought he could hear faint echoes. A melody, soft and distant. It wasn't a song exactly, but it had rhythm, emotion, life. It's beautiful, he said quietly. She smiled faintly. It is a sound only few can hear. You hear it because your heart listens. He didn't know what to say, but her words touched him more than she probably realized. They sat in silence, side by side, letting the faint light of the crystal bathe the room in calm blue. But peace never lasted long in their world. The next morning, the scanners picked up signals again, faint but definitely not human. The soldier's heart raced as he checked the readings. They're close, he said, his voice low. Maybe a few hours away. She stood quickly, her face calm but her eyes sharp. Then I must go, he shook his head. You won't survive out there alone. Not without help. She turned to him, her voice steady but filled with emotion she could no longer hide. If I stay, they will think you took me. Your people will be punished. Your world will suffer. He stepped closer, his voice firm. And if you go, they'll think we harmed you. Either way, war will come, unless we find another way. Her gaze met his, and steady, searching. You would stand against your own to protect me? He didn't hesitate. If it means saving lives, yes. She looked away, struggling to keep her composure. For the first time since he met her, her eyes glistened and she blinked quickly, trying to hide it. You make this hard, she whispered. I was taught never to trust, never to care, and now, I do not know how to stop. He felt a lump in his throat. Then don't stop. Silence filled the room. The air between them felt heavy, filled with words neither could say. She finally took a deep breath and said, If I stay, we must end the search. I can send a signal, one that tells them I am alive but not here. It will lead them away, he nodded quickly. Do it, whatever it takes. She placed the crystal on the table and closed her eyes. The light around it grew stronger, spreading across the room in waves of blue. The air seemed to vibrate softly as the crystal projected faint symbols in the air. She whispered in her language, words that sounded like music. Then as suddenly as it began, the light dimmed and the air grew still again. It is done, she said softly. They will follow the false trail. The soldier let out a long breath of relief. You're amazing, he said quietly. She tilted her head slightly. Amazing? It means you did something incredible, he explained with a smile. She looked down shyly, and for the first time her calm mask slipped completely. She smiled, and a real unguarded smile that reached her eyes. It lasted only a moment, but it made him forget the danger outside. Later that evening, they stood outside under the open sky. The stars stretched endlessly above them, shining bright against the dark blue. The princess looked up at them, her expression thoughtful. "In my world," she said, "we believe the stars watch over those who feel lost. Maybe they are watching us now. Then I hope they see that we're trying," he said with a grin. She turned to look at him, her voice soft but certain. "You changed something in me. I do not know what it is yet, but it feels alive." He looked at her, wanting to say something, but the words didn't come. He only nodded. That night, when they returned inside, she sat near the window, quietly watching the stars. The soldier could tell her thoughts were far away. She was struggling between two worlds, one that demanded strength and silence, and another that had taught her kindness and feeling. She whispered to herself, almost too softly for him to hear, "If I ever return, they will not understand this." He looked at her and said, "Maybe one day they will." Her eyes met his, and in that silent exchange they both knew their time together was limited. The peace they had found was fragile, borrowed from the chaos that surrounded them, but it was real. More real than anything either had known before. Outside, the night grew colder, but inside that small outpost, two souls from different worlds sat close, united not by words but by something deeper. The quiet understanding that even across galaxies, the heart speaks the same language, and though the princess tried to remain collected, her heart no longer obeyed her training. The human had shown her what her people never could, that to feel is not to fall but to rise beyond fear. For the first time in her life, she wished the night would never end. The next morning came quietly, but the air inside the outpost felt different. The soldier woke before sunrise and found the princess already standing by the window, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't move or speak for a long time, as if she was waiting for something she couldn't see yet. The faint light touched her face, and for a moment she looked like she was made of the morning itself, calm, bright, and far away. He watched her silently before asking, "Couldn't sleep again?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I heard something last night." "A call," he frowned. "From your people?" She nodded slowly. "They are close now. Closer than I thought. The false signal will not hold them off for long. They are searching not only for their princess but for a reason. If they find me here, they will see it as betrayal. And if your army discovers me, they will see me as a threat." The soldier felt a cold wave of fear wash through him. "Then what do we do?" She looked away, her voice soft but steady. "I must return. It is the only way to stop this before it begins." The words hit him like a heavy stone. He had known this moment would come, but not so soon. The thought of her leaving made his chest tighten. "Return after all this? After everything we've done to keep you safe?" She nodded slowly. "If I stay, both our worlds will burn. My people will not rest until they find me, and your people will never trust us again. I cannot allow that." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "So you're just going to walk away? Pretend none of this happened?" Her eyes softened. "Do you think I could ever forget this?" She asked quietly. "You showed me kindness when you had every reason to fear me. You taught me what it means to feel, to trust, but I was never meant to stay here. My life belongs to my people." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "And what about your heart? Doesn't it belong to you?" For a moment she said nothing. The silence between them was heavy, full of all the things they couldn't say. Finally she whispered, "It belongs everywhere I have found truth. And that includes here." She stepped closer and looked up at him. "I need your help one last time. There is a signal beacon near the mountains. If I reach it, I can call my people safely without anyone knowing you helped me." He stared at her, conflicted. "That's a long way from here. The area's full of scanners and drones. You'll never make it alone." She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Then I will not be alone." He exhaled, half smiling despite the ache in his chest. "You really don't give me a choice, do you?" Her lips curved faintly. "No, you made that choice the day you saved me." They spent the day preparing for the journey. The soldier packed food, water, and energy cells while she carefully sealed the crystal inside a small metal container. It pulsed faintly as if aware of what was coming. Before they left, the soldier walked through the outpost one last time. The place had become more than shelter. It had become their small world, a space between two lives. Every corner held a memory. The spot where she first spoke freely, the corner where she laughed at the taste of human tea, the window where they watched the stars. He touched the wall gently and whispered, "Goodbye." They set off at dusk. The air was cool and the wind carried the dry scent of sand. The mountains in the distance looked like sleeping giants under the fading light. They walked in silence for a long time, the sound of their steps the only thing breaking the quiet. As they climbed higher, the soldier noticed she was moving slower than usual. The wounds she had once hidden were clearly hurting again. He offered to stop, but she shook her head. "No, if we stop, they will find us before morning." He frowned. "You're hurt. You can't keep pushing like this." She looked at him, her voice steady. "Pain reminds me I am still alive. I can endure it." He sighed but didn't argue. He knew she wouldn't listen if he insisted. Instead, he walked closer, ready to catch her if she stumbled. When the night grew darker, they found shelter in a small cave. He lit a small lamp, and the soft glow filled the space with warmth. She sat down quietly, her face pale but calm. He handed her water, and for a while they didn't speak. Finally, she said, "When I return home, they will question me. They will ask what happened here. What should I tell them?" He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Tell them the truth. That a human saved your life. That we're not so different." She shook her head gently. "They will not believe that. They will think I was deceived. To them, emotions are weakness." He smiled sadly. "Then tell them weakness saved you." Her eyes glistened and she quickly looked away. "You speak like someone who has already lost something." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I have." The night grew colder. He handed her his jacket, but she refused at first. "You will be cold," she said softly. "I'll survive," he replied. "You need it more." She hesitated, then accepted it quietly. The jacket looked too big on her small frame, but somehow it suited her. She pulled it close, breathing in the faint scent of smoke and metal. For a moment, she felt comforted in a way she couldn't explain. They both knew it was their last night together, but neither wanted to say it aloud. Instead, they sat side by side, watching the lamp's flickering light paint shadows on the cave walls. Sometime later, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you look at the stars after I'm gone, will you remember me?" He looked at her and smiled softly. "I already know which one you are." She tilted her head, curious. "Which one?" He pointed upward through the cave's small opening. "The brightest one, the one that looks calm but hides a storm inside." She looked up too, her eyes shimmering. "You make it sound beautiful." "It is," he said quietly. They didn't speak again after that. The silence was full but peaceful. She leaned slightly toward him, her head resting near his shoulder. He didn't move, afraid to break the moment. When morning came, they continued their journey. The mountains were steeper now and the path rough. The soldier often walked ahead, clearing the way, but always turned back to make sure she was close. Each time she nodded faintly, assuring him she was fine. By midday, they reached the beacon site, a small metal structure half buried in the rocks, ancient but still functional. The soldier helped her climb the last few steps. She placed her hands on the surface and the machine came to life, glowing with soft blue light. She looked at him and said, "Once I send the signal, they will come for me. You must leave before they arrive." He shook his head. "Not until I know you're safe." She smiled sadly. "Always so stubborn." "Always," he said with a small grin. She touched the crystal, and light flowed from it into the beacon. The air hummed as symbols formed in the air, spinning like tiny stars. She whispered in her language again, words filled with calm strength. After a moment, the light faded. She turned to him slowly. "It is done. They will come soon." He looked at her for a long time, memorizing every detail, the silver in her hair, the calm in her eyes, the warmth she tried so hard to hide. "So this is goodbye," he said quietly. She nodded. "For now." He tried to smile. "You think we'll ever meet again?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. "If the stars are kind." Before he could say another word, she reached out and placed the glowing crystal in his hand. "Keep this," she said softly. "It carries truth, and truth should be protected. He looked down at it, then back at her.
What will you take with you?
She placed her hand over her heart. This, what I have learned here. They stood there for a long moment, the wind moving softly around them. Then, far in the distance, a bright light appeared in the sky, the unmistakable glow of an alien ship descending. It's time, she said quietly. He nodded, his throat tight. Go before they see me. She turned to leave but stopped halfway. For a heartbeat, she looked back at him, her composure trembling just slightly. Then she whispered, "Goodbye, my human." And with that, she walked into the light. He stood there long after she was gone, the crystal glowing softly in his hand. The wind carried the faint echo of the ship's engines and the mountains fell silent again. He looked up at the sky, and for a moment, he thought he saw a single star flicker brighter than the rest. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Goodbye, princess." The beacon went dark, but the crystal in his palm kept shining, its light warm and steady, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Years passed, and the desert where the old outpost once stood became quiet again. The war that everyone feared never came. Instead, strange messages began to move between the stars, messages of peace, not threat. People spoke of new beginnings, of understanding between humans and those from beyond. But only one man knew where that peace had truly started. The soldier still lived on the edge of the same desert. The outpost was long gone, but he had built a small cabin near the same spot, where the mountains turned gold in the evening light. He liked the silence there. It reminded him of a time that no one else knew about, a time when he met someone who had changed everything he thought he understood about life. He never told anyone the full story. When people asked why he chose to live so far away from the city, he simply smiled and said, "Because the stars are clearer here." Every night he sat outside his cabin, the glowing crystal still in his hand. Its light had faded over the years, but it never went dark. Sometimes, when the wind was still, he thought he could hear a faint hum inside it, like a heartbeat from another world. He often wondered what became of her, the alien princess who once stood proud and calm, struggling to hide the storm inside her heart. He imagined her back on her planet, walking through bright halls, ruling with the same grace he had seen in her even when she was weak and wounded. But he also hoped she still carried some of the warmth she had learned here, the warmth of feeling, the power of kindness. One night, as he sat under the stars, the sky above shimmered brighter than usual. A large blue light cut across the sky, moving slower than any shooting star he'd ever seen. He stood, his heart racing, watching it fade behind the mountains. He whispered to himself, "It can't be." The next morning he woke early and walked toward the ridge where the light had vanished. The wind was sharp and the sand stung his face, but he didn't stop. Something deep inside told him he needed to see it for himself. When he reached the top, he froze. There, half buried in the sand, was a small silver sphere no larger than his hand. It wasn't damaged. It looked as if it had been gently placed there. Carefully, he picked it up. The surface was smooth and cool, and the moment he touched it, a soft blue light flickered across it. Then a faint voice filled the air around him. "I wondered if you would still be here." It was her voice, calm, soft, familiar, just as he remembered. He felt his throat tighten as the light grew brighter and a faint image appeared above the sphere. It was her. She looked older now, but her eyes were the same, clear, steady, kind. "I cannot stay," the voice continued, "but I wanted to see your world one more time. Much has changed here, and much has changed in me." He stared at the image, afraid to blink in case it disappeared. "My people listen now," she said. "They have seen what I saw. We speak not of power, but of understanding. We learned that peace cannot come from silence alone. It must come from hearts that choose to feel. You showed me that." The soldier swallowed hard. "I didn't do anything," he said softly, though she could not hear him. Her image flickered slightly as if sensing his words. "You did everything," she said. "You gave without asking, trusted without reason, and showed me the meaning of truth. I carry that in every decision I make. It lives in our world now." For a moment the image softened. She smiled, a small real smile that he remembered from their last night together. "I do not know if we will ever meet again," she said. "But know this, you are remembered. Not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as the one who taught a princess how to feel." The light began to fade, and the sphere grew dim in his hands. He whispered, Goodbye. Her voice, soft and distant now, answered. Not goodbye, only until the stars cross again. Then the light vanished, leaving him standing alone in the morning wind. He stood there for a long time, the sphere pressed against his chest. The ache in his heart was heavy, but it wasn't the same kind of pain he once felt. This time it was full of warmth, a quiet pride that something good had come from the impossible. Days turned into weeks, and the story of that strange sphere spread through nearby towns. People said it was a sign from the stars, proof that humans were not alone. Scientists came to study it, but none could unlock its mystery. The soldier let them take their notes and make their theories, but he never told them the truth. To him, it wasn't a mystery. It was a message. As years went by, contact between humans and her kind slowly began. The first meetings were cautious, but there was no hostility. The leaders on both sides spoke of peace, of friendship, and of lessons learned from history. What no one knew was that those talks were possible because of two beings who met by chance, far away from the eyes of their people. Sometimes, when the soldier watched the news on the old screen in his cabin, he caught glimpses of her image, older, regal, standing before her council. Her voice carried across the broadcast, calm and certain. She spoke of cooperation, respect, and trust. She spoke of seeing beauty in difference, and though she never said his name because she never could, he knew she was speaking of him. One evening, as the desert turned red under the setting sun, the soldier walked outside again. He sat in his old chair, the crystal still glowing faintly beside him. The sky stretched endlessly above, painted with gold and purple light. He took a slow breath and said softly, "You kept your promise." For a moment the wind seemed to answer, warm and gentle against his face. He closed his eyes, smiling. He remembered everything. The day he found her lying among the wreckage. The sound of her voice when she first spoke. The way she looked at the sunrise as if seeing it for the first time. He remembered her laughter, her silence, her strength. She had come into his life like a storm and left like a whisper. But she had changed the meaning of everything he thought he knew about humanity. As the night deepened, the stars began to appear one by one. He looked up, searching until he found the one he always looked for, the brightest one in the sky. It glowed softly, steady and calm, like it was watching over him. He raised the crystal toward it and said, "I hope you're happy wherever you are." The crystal shimmered faintly, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw the star flicker in reply. He smiled again, the kind of smile that comes not from joy or sorrow, but from peace. Time passed quietly after that. The soldier grew older, but he never left the desert. Sometimes young officers visited him, asking questions about the early peace missions between humans and the aliens. He listened to their curiosity, their excitement, and their hope. Before they left, they always asked the same thing. "Sir, do you really believe that one person can change everything?" He would always smile and answer, "I don't just believe it. I've seen it." When the nights grew cold, he would light a small fire and hold the crystal near it, letting its blue glow dance with the flames. And though the world outside kept changing, new ships, new cities, new alliances, his heart stayed in that one small moment years ago, when an alien princess struggled to stay collected while meeting a human soldier, and somehow, against all odds, found something worth believing in. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the cabin late at night, it carried a faint sound with it, a melody soft and distant, like the one that came from her crystal long ago. It was almost as if the stars themselves remembered their story, and maybe they did. Because some stories are not written in books or carved in stone. Some live quietly in the spaces between worlds, carried by those who were brave enough to feel, even when it was forbidden. On his final night, long after the wars had ended and peace had become the new normal, the soldier sat beneath the stars one last time. The crystal in his hand pulsed softly as if keeping rhythm with his slowing heartbeat. He looked up at the sky, whispered her name, one that no one else would ever know, and smiled. When the morning came, the cabin was silent, but the crystal on the table glowed brighter than ever, sending a thin beam of blue light through the window toward the sky. Far above, in a distant world bathed in silver light, a figure stood on a balcony looking at the same stars. For a moment she felt a warmth touch her heart, a quiet sense of peace familiar and deep. She looked up, smiled softly, and whispered, "Until the stars cross again." And though they belonged to different worlds, their story lived on, Not in history books, not in tales of war or power, but in the quiet truth that even across galaxies, the smallest act of compassion can change everything.